You know, I had planned for a stream today, and I was not necessarily planning on a time. But 2 minutes until 4:30 would be rather unique for a YouTuber. So if 4:30 was a time I was planning on going live, I am early. What YouTube stream starts early? I don't know. Got me. But my point is, hello, welcome to Sunday Update Stream. I am your host, Skeptical Root, and I am doing updates for my job, which gives me an opportunity to sit down at my computer for an extended period of time and do stuff. So one thing I'm doing today, I was going to talk about, I really don't have a lot of topics today. I haven't sat down and thought about anything that really made me be like, yeah, I got to talk about that. Though I did have a Word doc with some ideas. Yeah, now it's missing. Where was it? Desktop. Video ideas. It is no longer on my desktop. Dun dun dun. So one thing I will talk about real quickly here, or real quick, is I am now a subscriber to NordVPN. This is not a sponsored video. They were well rated, going through several of the the VPN providers. I selected Nord, because they had a good sale going on, which was 3 years for $100, give or take. Ooh, I think I'm changing. Oh no! What if that killed me? Pretty good deal, because give it a few seconds here, because this is probably still recording. Maybe it's still recording. Who knows? Right, we are connected. The number of possible locations that I could stream for, or that I could VPN to or from. Plus, they were all rated. They were on sale. Good times had by all. Maybe someday they'll sponsor me, but I doubt it, with only having 50 subs. So that's a little ramble, not necessarily related to any of this stuff. I lost a folder, which I'll look for later. I had some video ideas on it that I was looking at not that long ago, apparently, but have now disappeared. Put this over here. I cleaned up my desktop a little bit. I know it was the last time you may have seen it. It had a lot more icons on it. I just random stuff that I'd throw, like, oh, I'll save this for later. Like here, look, you see these right here. Do. Those are response videos. Those are videos from Steve Shives that I responded to, or well, this one here is from Mike.com on racism, the P+P definition of racism, which was, if you watched any of my stuff, you saw that. You saw all those. I still haven't done anything with the files that I used to make clips out of for the response videos, so they're still sitting there. I don't like seeing Steve's face every time I go into my desktop, so I don't really look. But I found some other places that I could put stuff, and I don't recall moving my my particular folder ideas. I had a folder on my desktop called desktop icons or desktop items or something like that, which apparently I moved, and I didn't mean to. So now I got to go find it again. I feel like this is some of the stuff, and I don't see. Yeah, this looks like some of the stuff that I moved. I don't see my video ideas on here anywhere. So I'm going to do a search for video ideas. It's on the other screen. You can't see it. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You'll notice my room behind me has not gotten cleaned up at all yet. Because I'm sure somebody has thought about this at one point or another. These boxes are boxes I'm saving because I have a bookshelf over here and a bookshelf over here. And like these things here. Little items that I'm not throwing away, but I want to keep. An example, I have these little trampoline springs that are all broken. My kids have a little, trampoline up in the living room that they have loved to jump on since my oldest, who's now 9, was 2 years old. I've gone through 2, at least, sets of springs for it. And I've kept all the old ones because I would like to get into some amateur blacksmithing at some point. And spring steel is something that I've heard is fairly decent to work with. Now, these are chromed. I'm sure I could find a way to do something about that or not have it matter. But I kept the spring steel because it's spring steel. It's probably not great quality spring steel, but it is spring steel nonetheless. And it's just possibly decent metal that I can do something with. So I haven't gotten rid of it. Those can go in a little box and get thrown in the rafters or in the attic or something like that. In the event that I ever do that, it's just a lot of stuff, not necessarily like that, but things. Like, let's see, what else do I got over here? I have some super glue and some spray paint, a knife sharpening set, some of that stuff you put under carpet so they don't slide around on the floors, on the hard floors. Got that. I have some old speakers, a couple sets of speakers for my Echo Dot that I have sitting right here next to me on my computer. Things like that. My desk is just as much of a mess for similar reasons. I tend to keep stuff, and like these I have over here, I have a dresser, and you can kind of maybe not can't see the edge of it. There's a 6-drawer dresser over here. It's all full of cables and cords, and I have this stack of cables and cords that I need to go through and clean up. Mostly, it's mostly network cables, and then file in my drawer system over here. Along with these ones that you see, I started managing some of them. HDMI cable, another HDMI cable, So I've gotten started. I didn't get very far because it's one of those things I think I'll do when I'm sitting here doing like nothing else, and there's never a time when I'm doing that. So yeah, that's the story of my disorganized desk and the reason for all my boxes, in case anybody ever wondered. People keep messing up my blanket on my couch there. I have it usually situated rather nicely, and then someone will sit on the couch and mess up the blanket and just kind of toss it back up there. I get tired of straightening it. But, it's not their space. It's my space, and I want my space the way I want it. It's not necessarily their job to make my space nice. So let's see here. Those are shortcuts to recent documents. Video ideas doc, say 728. I think this is my older version. Okay, close that. And then go back to here. Yeah, this is my old list. I had another list that is... Maybe this is the shortcuts I had there. Those were 11.1. That's all from today. Recent documents. Yeah, okay. So, maybe I didn't save it that way. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. One thing I'm going to do a stream on at some point. It's going to be a long stream, and I don't have time for it today. But I'm going to go through all my subscriptions. And I've been looking here at my subscription list. I have 452 subscriptions, channels that I subscribe to. Some of them are people currently putting out content. Some of them are people that are not putting out content. Some of them are putting out content that I don't watch. All right, so I have 452 more on top of this 8 or whatever. So 460 roughly channels that I subscribe to. There are some channels that I need to unsubscribe from that I haven't yet. And some of them I want to unsubscribe to them, and it's not because I don't like them anymore. It's just that I don't watch them anymore. Perfect examples would be like David Pakman, who every once in a while he'll do a video that I really like, but I just don't have time to watch all of the clips that he puts out. Secular Talk with Kyle Kalinske, another one, you know. I don't disagree with their politics any more than I disagree with, say, Sargon of Akkad. You know, this one right here. You know, I don't disagree with them anymore. Like Sargon's more right, and David and Kyle are more left. David's probably not too much further left than I am. Kyle is far more left, and he's rather ideological, and it's cute, but it's not informative per se. Sometimes his stuff is okay. Sometimes his stuff is good. When I'm in a mood to rant about the right wing, he's a good channel to watch. Just haven't been into that lately. I'm finding subtlety in people's positions, in ways that I don't think a lot of people in the political the political sphere have enough tolerance for. And I think this is something that has to do with the polarization of ideas in America, where you're either a fascist or a Nazi. There are many more positions in the middle than there are on either extreme. Jordan Peterson is a perfect example of what happens to people when they label somebody something. I'm a fan of Jordan Peterson's to the extent that I agree with a lot of his psychological research stuff. I disagree with nearly everything he has to say regarding philosophy and Carl Jung and archetypes and things like that. I think it's overgrandizing. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this coherently. I think that he's trying to look for an overarching epistemology for how the universe works, and there isn't one. He's trying to apply a model framework to how people are, and I don't think that there is, you're going to run into problems with that no matter what method or model you come up with. All models are flawed. Concordance, I think, did a video on that not too long ago. Great video. It really got me thinking. It was a way my thinking was moving in general to then, but he helped give me words for that. That all models are flawed, because the only thing that can represent reality is reality itself. Models give us the ability to describe parts of something, but they don't give us the ability to fully understand something and to fully articulate it. The idea that there is a grand unified theory of the universe is nice, but it's almost naive, I think, to some extent. And I don't mean this in the mathematical terms. I think that there's going to be a set of formulas that we can come up with that primarily explain the very basic features of the universe. But it's not going to be one. It's going to be a collection of them, much like there is now. Because they're all only models, and they're all only going to look at some aspect of the universe, and they're going to give us the ability to describe it in certain ways, and we're going to have a better understanding of the universe. But except for being the universe, none of these things can actually be the universe, if that makes any sense. I hope it does, because I can't think of another way to articulate it. So the example that from the video that I saw was about, this king asks this map maker to make him a perfect map of his kingdom, and he makes spends years and years and years making a nice two-dimensional map, accurate down to the inch or the foot or something like that. And the king looks at it, he says that's a great job, but people don't live on flat maps. They live in dimensional space. And so he goes back and he makes another map, and this time he makes it with model houses, and he tries to put them in the right places and things like that. But as of course over time, things change, things move around. Finally, the map maker gets done with his map, and the king, who's a bit older now, comes and says, yes, but it's to scale, but it's not really a good representation, because you can't really, you don't really have any sense of size when it comes to how big the carts are, or the houses are. It's all, scaled down. It's not a good representation still. So finally he goes back and teaches his apprentice, and apprentice takes over, because basically they recreate an exact replica of the kingdom, down to the size of the houses and the plots of land, and in this process things happen and change, and the kingdom falls into disarray. But finally the apprentice finishes the exact replica of the kingdom, and the king on his deathbed praises it and whatever. And I'm getting two versions of the story mixed up, because in one version they move into the replica because it represented the kingdom in its heyday and not as it is now, and because no matter what, it's not going to be an exact. The only thing that can be reality is reality itself. Models are going to only be able to represent parts of that reality. I feel like I've talked about that before, but my point was that Jordan Peterson gets lumped into groups of Nazis or fascists. Nazis or fascists. Those are or fascists or communists. That's it. Nazis or communists. Choose the political, ideological separations, but there are parts of what he says that are very insightful, and I think very honest, and things that we need to remember about the world, and to prevent ourselves from becoming too ideological. His GQ interview, which I just listened to yesterday, is a perfect example. I think he was for the most part, he was very reasonable and well-spoken in that interview. And I actually think he brought his interviewer around a little bit to his understanding of things from her far more ideological position. And I think that they were able to finish it off with more agreement than, and she kind of came into it a little more adversarially. He was a little defensive and guarded. And at one point he even said, you seem like you're very ideological. I don't, from what you're saying, you could be anybody. You don't have to be who you are, because when you take on an ideology, you represent that ideology instead of representing yourself. And in his case, he was talking about, man, I'm having a lot of drop frames. See if that helps my frames here. Tons of frames here. Here's an idea. I don't think the position is right. I am more than willing to listen to him talk about gender and gender roles and equality and things that that have to deal with human social interactions with a basis in biology. He does, for all intents and purposes, seem to be well read on it. He can, generally speaking, cite his sources and things like that. Sometimes I think he misinterprets them, but I think everybody misinterprets stuff. And overall, I like the guy. It's because I think that he's willing to listen most of the time. When you get into talking about Christianity and religion, I think that he holds more of an ideological stance than most people do. Well, than most, I should say, he holds more of an ideological stance than other atheists do. Because one thing that I think Freud got right, even though most of it, the rest of Freud has, I don't want to say discredited, but moved away from, is that he what the heck was that? Freud was very clearly understood about the idea that that you can understand what people really mean by listening to them, and what they really think and how they express themselves comes through in their verbal communication. The whole idea of Freudian slips and all that kind of stuff was about people not being able to hide very well how they really feel about stuff all the time, because we lie as a different person, and our real person, kind of explaining this as strangely as I can, this here. We have the person that we believe we are, and who we think we are, and who we understand ourselves to be. When we lie, we step away from that, because we're, generally speaking, try to be honest with ourselves. And we believe we're honest with ourselves at all times. When we know we're being deceptive, we actually have to step out of who we are and place ourselves into another context. That context isn't the natural state of things, and so it's hard to maintain that. And Freud's idea was that these slips are some parts possible dissonance, some parts, deliberate deception in some cases, in order to, like our true self, our ego, now in this case it would be our superego, pokes through. It pokes holes in our ego, because it's more of who we think we are. For the most part, I think that that's fairly true. I think that from listening to Jordan Peterson as much as I have, which isn't, I'm certainly not, I don't listen to him as much as other people, but from listening to him, I think I can delineate some of his positions on things that are up in the air. I believe that Jordan Peterson is an atheist, and an atheist in the context of, he does not believe that there is a supernatural being in the sky. He does not believe in the common understanding of God or gods. You might be able to sell him on the idea that there could be superior alien races, or even superior humans. But you aren't going to convince him that there is a man in the sky kind of thing, or on a mountain, or under the sea, or any of that stuff. That is not the God that he believes in. He lacks a belief in God. He is an atheist. Although he's not necessarily an atheist. He's an adeist. Not only is there not a personal God to him, I don't think he believes that there is even a deistic God. I think he would look at it as metaphorical. And he'd look at it as a truth, that there was some metaphorical God, whether you call that creation or something like that, or the universe itself. It is not he may act as if there is a God, but his personal belief is that the God, as we envision the idea of God, is not a true proposition. And I think part of that comes from the fact that he says that he acts as if God exists, and he says that he won't say that he believes that there is a God. If he believed in God, it would not change any atheist's opinion about him. And they are a small minority, even if they are a growing minority of people. People who don't believe in a personal God. The only way that there is a cost to that is if he finds himself alienating himself from the majority. Which he doesn't want to do, because he wants people to listen to him and not... And I understand him not wanting to pigeonhole himself into this idea that he's an atheist, because then he gets all that baggage that goes along with it. He doesn't want to necessarily be associated as a Christian necessarily either, except for the type of Christianity that he espouses. This whole metaphorical truth kind of thing. And my big counter to that, to Dr. Peterson, if by any chance you happen to watch this video, any story will work. The biblical stories aren't special. They are not the grounding of humanity in story. Those things exist outside of Christianity, which is why you have the same exact types of nobility and strength of character in cultures that have never known the Judeo-Christian tradition, which is very different. Judaism and Christianity are very different. Calling anything Judeo-Christian is kind of weird. It's Judeo-Christian only in the idea that Christians use part of the Judea text for their holy book. Because at the same time, you could say that there is a Judeo-Islamic or Judeo-Muslim tradition too. It's about as well served. I guess the difference being that in Islam they rewrote those stories instead of just tacking them on. But they were still Semitic people. They were still in the same regions. All that's those similarities, you know. So I'm willing to listen to him, and I'm willing to take in the things that I agree with and argue with the things that I don't agree with. And I found that when Jordan bases his opinions and his positions on scientific literature that he can cite, or his experiences that he can cite as a psychologist, I tend to agree with him. I tend to say, you know what? There are differences in male and female brains. That seems to be sensible. Apparently I'm still dropping a ton of frames. I'm still dropping a ton of frames. I'm not on the VPN anymore. I don't think I am. Nope. So, well, dropping tons of frames. 86%. That was 9 minutes ago. All right, well, never mind. As long as it's intermittent like that, 10, 12 minutes ago. As I was saying, then I can tend to agree with him. We're talking about the male and female brains. You know, it's like right and left, and this is a gender thing too. It's like right and left. You know, the more you can be more right, you can be more left. Those are my right and left, in case you're confused. If you're more right, you know, let's say you're female, and if you're more left, you're more male. You can be like right here and still be male and female. You know, here, let's say my zipper is the center line here distinguishes. There will be a few people on the line. They're riding directly on the zipper that don't make left or right. But that does not in any way invalidate the left-right dichotomy at all. Just because there are people that can be on the zipper in the middle doesn't mean that left and right are not things. I think gender is no. I think sex is the same way. Gender is a representation of the manifestation of characteristics expected to fit with one sex or the other. So, in my opinion, there are only two genders because there are only two sexes, and it's based on sex. In case I haven't made that clear before, that does not mean that people cannot identify with different gender roles. I think we just need to clarify what we're talking about. Somebody can be a male and male. How does that work? And identify as a man. They can be a male, identify as a woman, because those are gender pairings that are not strictly tied to one another. And that's fine. You can, all for people who are transgender who want to do that. They can go so far as to have surgery and, make themselves as much the other gender as they possibly can. That won't necessarily change their sex, and this whole thing wouldn't have been a problem if it wasn't for the Puritans and puritanical Protestants not liking the word sex on forums when we wanted to know what someone's sex was, so we couldn't say sex, we had to say gender, and that has created this whole... It contributed greatly to this great chasm of sex and gender that we have nowadays. They are not interchangeable terms any more than sky and blue are interchangeable terms. What else can I say? So I haven't read this Aereo piece yet by Laura Kennedy, but I'm reading the link that got me here from Twitter. It kind of illustrates the point that I think how I feel about Jordan, and that is that when he gets into his more ideological positions, he becomes more dogmatic and he becomes less fluent in what he's talking about. He's decidedly against postmodernism as an ideology, not necessarily the literature criticism aspect of it, and not even necessarily against using critical theory as a basis for decision making. Jordan and I might both agree that what needs to happen, though, is that it is a starting point. It is not an ending point. And the being critical of the norm is fine. Just don't disqualify that norm as an answer just because you're being critical of it. And that's one thing that a lot of postmodernists do when applying critical theory to social situations or social constructs and things like that, is that what they do is they say, let's look at how this is wrong and keep going. It's never that, or it seems like, relatively speaking, it's never that that the solution that we have now might be the best solution that we have, or it might even be the answer to what the problem is. We just need to apply it more. The question always seems to be that if we challenge those norms, they can't be right. And that, I think, is fundamentally wrong. And provided we can go back and look at these things and assess them for what they are and decide that while these things may be different and they may not be perfect, they may be what we have to work with or what is best now, and maybe work more towards fixing them instead of scrapping the whole system and coming up with African voodoo magic and making lightning strike people. Which we can show doesn't work demonstrably, experimentally. Having said all that, I hover around this area about being a fan of Jordan or not being a fan of Jordan. I will listen to Jordan, and I rarely. I say, depending on what he's talking about, I don't often find fault with him. I think that he did not do all that well against Matt Dillahunty with discussing religion in general, because they were talking about different things and they weren't coming to a conclusion. They needed to define their terms more clearly. Jordan tends to obfuscate around the idea that he can't describe what he believes, or that people are not able to articulate what they believe, which frankly, if you can't articulate what you believe, that's a problem on your part, not a problem on what the rest of us are. We are the only people and the best judges of what we believe, as opposed to what we do. We don't always act out what we believe. There is not necessarily a hierarchy of values. I've often argued that with regard to the hierarchy of values thing is that Jordan says, we might have a whole bunch of different hierarchies, competing hierarchies, and we do. And that's the problem. That is why we end up with things like cognitive dissonance, and why we end up with people doing things that they don't understand why they did them, is because we have this conflict of these ideas where we say to ourselves, why the hell did I do that? And it's not because we don't believe in one thing over another. It's because we prioritize different things at different times. An example that I tried to give, and this may or may not be true, but let's say my child was in trouble with the law. Depending on what that offense is, I might lie for them. I might go to bat for them. I might try to do things that would go against my normal principle of being honest and finding those things that are true and perpetuating those things that are true, because I love my child. But there is going to be a point where that's no longer useful or good, or I might lie to the cops about him stealing a candy bar if I think they're going to arrest him for something as petty as that. But if he had murdered somebody, I don't know how far out of my way I would go to help him cover that up. My principle is that my highest value is truth, but there are situations where I will lie or something like that for the betterment of what I consider my interests. And my interests are going to be entirely dependent on the situation. Imagine a board of sliders with things that are more or less important. They're all tied to stressors in our environment. Let's say they're truth, happiness, health, well-being, and wealth. They all respond differently to environmental stresses and the nature of those stresses, and they will move up and down, as which is most important depending on the things that are influencing those things. We are all that way. Nobody, and I say this nobody with quote fingers because I'm using an absolute term here to not necessarily mean absolute. It's emphatic and not literal. If you ever hear me say absolute language, I'm meaning it relativistically, not absolutely. So if I say nobody, what I mean is there are in a large enough population, there may be some people that are that way, but I digress. Nobody has a strict set of values that are always the same. It may be idealistic, or it might be a noble goal to always do that. But everybody, because we look at this as a flaw of humanity, but it's actually having situational awareness is actually one of the things that help us survive. It may be good for the in-group for us to always be honest, but it may not be good for the perpetuation of our genes. And so we may lie. We're more likely to lie to protect family members than we are to protect other people in our in-group, even if we treat people in the in-group as our family, because we have this removal of genetic material, and our two primary biological imperatives are, one, to survive, and two, to procreate. People fail at those all the time, but we all have those two things. And once we do, the closer we are to perpetuating our own genes and maintaining our own genes. My children are more important to me than my cousins, or to my second cousins, or aunts and uncles, and things like that. Because they're a closer genetic match to me. They're more part of they have more of my genome in it. My genome wants to survive. It may not be good for the social group, and we may be outcast, but my genes will be passed on, and my kids can go start their own groups should they decide to do that. And even if I value social cohesion and talk about how everybody else needs to be honest all the time, I, depending on the circumstance, will violate that own rule, that rule of mine. We all want to live in this society, in this world where everybody follows the rules all the time. And that's what laws are based on, and that is actually a type 2 error propensity, where we want to have everybody following the same set of rules. The only exceptions to those are the people who create those rules. Right-leaning people, as my personal theory of the left-right dichotomy, is people on the left tend to favor type 1 errors, which is, type 1 errors are false positives, type 2 errors are false negatives. People on the left tend to, I will call it, agentize things more often. They give things agency that they don't necessarily have. They tend to be more cautious because they expect things to go bad or to whatever, and they tend to survive. On the right, this is my right and left because this is my right hand and this is my left hand, in case you're confused by that. On the right, people are more likely to expect people to live by certain principles. They want the rules to be the same for everybody. While you tend to have things like flat taxes and limited government and things like that on the right, because they want people to live by the principles of honesty and charity and family and things like that. And they expect everyone to follow those rules. And everybody should follow those rules unless they personally need to make an exception to that rule, and then they'll want to violate that rule. But if everybody's operating in the same way, then everybody has the same rules, everybody can act the same way, everything can be fair, and everybody knows what to expect. It's also why conservatism tends to favor the right, and liberalism tends to favor the left. Because on the left, we don't expect people to be the same, so we expect people to have the same rights and freedoms, the same abilities, as opposed to the same principles. So, liberalism tends to favor the left. It is not exclusive to the left, because there are several center-right people who are very liberal, which is, I believe, where I would place libertarians is more center-left than far-left. But that goes into this whole left-right political dichotomy as opposed to up-down. Liberal and conservative are not opposite positions. I keep hitting my mic stand. Progressivism is the more far left position. People wanting to go forward and make things. And on both far ends, the far conservatives and the far progressives tend to be authoritarian. There you go. Horseshoe theory explained. Because they want things to stay like they are, and they want things to move forward. And if people aren't going to come along with them, God damn it, they're going to move people. They're going to make people do it. As we get more towards the center, we tend to get more liberal egalitarianism, that type of thing, where we want people to be as free as they can, which represent the bottom part of the horseshoe, but it's really a circle. Or if you look at the political compass, it tends to be... Here, I got a political compass. Boop, 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 boop. Let's go here. Go here. There. Oops. So that's me in Political Compass, in case anybody's wondering. But authoritarianism tends to be up here. Libertarianism tends to be down here. This is where people are free. These are more progressive. These are more conservative. These are more authoritarian. These are more authoritarian, but these are also more conservative authoritarian, and these are more progressive authoritarians. So you can see I'm fairly down in the libertarian, fairly over on the progressive, but I'm not crazy. I'm just kind of in the middle here. So that is what I'm talking about. But Jordan Peterson, where this all coming back around here, Jordan Peterson, oddly enough, I believe, based on the things that he says, is a liberal conservative. A perfect example of how liberalism is not opposite of conservatism or conservatism. When I was growing up, it was always conservatism, and somehow that has all been lost to conservatism. It doesn't make sense for it to be conservatism. Beard hair. Because it is not the position of a conservative or of a conserve. It is a position of a conservative. Just like liberalism isn't a libism. It's a liberalism. Because the person is a liberal and the person is a conservative. It should be conservativism. Because it is a position of conservatives. Just like it is a position of liberals. But Jordan is a conservative liberal. He thinks that people should have as much freedom as they can, but we should not abandon the principles that we've grown up from. And that's part of his linking back to Christianity, because it's the Western tradition for thousands of years. He's tying those two things together, and I think he's tying them together inappropriately, but not wrongly, if that makes any sense. They don't necessarily belong to one another, but at the same time, they are not diametrically opposed. I think that makes sense. Nothing in the chat. Pull that up for a second, because nobody cares about my streams. I'm just doing this for content. Now that we're almost 49 minutes, 15 seconds into it, hopefully this comes out okay. Dun dun dun. Yeah, cookie's fine. I do want to get back to making more produced content. I just don't have time for it. Streaming takes me half the time or less. I'd have to, I mean, I actually have some videos that I've bookmarked to address. I don't think I'm going to. I do want to go back and circling this all back around again to my subscriptions. People that I want to unsubscribe from. People that I've completely, like, at one point I liked, and there's like those one things that I want to address before I get rid of the channel. I'm sure there was one thing from Steve Shives, which is why I haven't got rid of him yet. I enjoyed Atheist Reads until he did a book where he basically spent an entire chapter, which incidentally mentioned Sam Harris. He just spent like the rest of the video just like, you know, oh, stupid Sam Harris, the Islamophobe Sam Harris. It's like, I can't do this anymore. I started the next video and he started off on something about Sam Harris. I'm like, he's not even mentioning this chapter. Why are you talking about him still? Just shut up. Talk about the book. Couldn't do it. And that was like a year ago. But I still enjoyed Stephen Stuffy, and then Stephen Stuffy, like, I actually enjoyed him. Actually, good writing for Stephen Stuffy until one of the characters' half brother or something like that came along, and he was a different dog, but he was like I think he's supposed to represent a liberal centrist, a liberalist, if you will. And it just was it was awful. Not only did I not like the character, the character sounded entirely reasonable in what they were saying, but of course they had to say everything like a fedora tipping 17-year-old living in his parents' basement, which I think he actually did live in his parents' basement. And it was just irritating. So, but that Christy Winters, I want to address her, her video that she did on mythicism. She had a video series on it that was just awful. I have stayed subscribed to her, and that was a year ago or so. So anyway, I go through my channels and unsubscribe from people that I'm done with or haven't watched or something. So anyway, my family apparently is home, so I'm going to cut this short and say thanks a lot for watching. Goodbye and hello, as always. Oh, I'll link that Arrow article in the subscriptions or in the description box. So have fun. Happy Sunday.